The girls at school had started removing their fingers. Kate Mickelson did it first. She sat next to me in chemistry. She was popular, and I really wanted to be like her. 5 minutes into Mr. Taylor's lesson, Kate marched into the classroom, weaved her way through the tables, and slung her bag on the desk next to me. She dropped into her chair, whipping her plates over her shoulder. The smell came first. Wafts of alcohol stung the back of my eyes. It was as if Mr. Taylor had decided to pour every test tube he had onto the back of my chair. Kate pressed her palm onto the table. Her hand was a thick mitt of bloodied bandages, and she just let it sit there, nonchalant, like it didn't matter. I tried to distract myself with the crunch of an apple. Its sharpness swilled under my tongue, yet my eyes fixed on Kate's butchered fingers. Taking a risk, I decided to ask her, Kate? I hesitated, wondering if I should know better. Did you hurt yourself? Oh, you noticed. Kate smiled and flexed her finger nubs under the bandages. I got them done yesterday. It's a shame I have to keep them all wrapped up. Mom said I needed to wait until they were fully healed. Was this real life? My eyebrows nodded above my nose. Stop it, Lucy. Look cool. Cool. I flicked my hair back and picked at the old lilac varnish on my fingernails. I've been thinking about getting my fingers done too. Lucy, I didn't think this would be your sort of thing. I nodded, not too much, just a little. Last term, Jenny Olsen in physics had gotten her belly button pierced, and it set off a long chain of one-upmanship amongst the popular girls, each wanting to sparkle more than the rest. Kira Davies pierced her belly button and put a stud through her tongue. Beth Jackson got her tongue done and a hoop through her nose. Then, when Josie Kens arrived at class looking as though her face had lost a fight with a nail gun, our head teacher declared a school-wide ban on any visible piercings, resulting in a classroom of disappointed and punctured girls. Before the ban, and wanting to join in on the fun, I had pleaded to my parents, hoping to pierce my ears. Mother had said she didn't agonize through 18 hours of labor for her daughter to turn herself into a set of janitor's keys. I then protested to my father, but he waved me away, saying that I was born with the correct amount of holes and should be grateful. I was not going to miss the boat on this occasion. I'm hoping to remove a foot as well, I said. Didn't I sound smug? I thought that taking amputation a step further would make me seem more hardcore. Wasn't that how these things went? More is always better. Kate shot me a curious smile. I breathed in deep. She laughed. You're out there. She shuffled closer to me. Why haven't I known this about you? I shrugged. Words would have ruined the moment. Well, if you want to try it out. Kate touched my arm. A few of us are having a hack party tonight. You should totally come. Her smile persuaded me this was the right thing to do. Sure. That was the first time I had ever liked the sound of my own voice. I sounded so certain, so confident, like a completely different person. The sky was beginning to bruise as I arrived at the party. A dress code wasn't specified, so I wore my best clothes. Nothing white, of course. It wasn't Kate's house. I wasn't sure whose house it was, but she answered the door, holding a tangle of rope. She was already drunk. There was a glassiness to her eyes, and her cheeks were smudged with eyeliner, making her look like a wet panda. Perhaps she'd been crying, perhaps not. Her smile was distracting enough to stop me asking. I had brought some beers. Kate's friends arrived with bottles of vodka and party snacks. Kate's uncle showed up with the cleavers after a shift at the abattoir. Once everyone had a chance to drink and get to know each other, the knives came out. A girl with her hair sprayed into wild, fiery wisps skimmed through the party playlist. I found it pretty annoying that we couldn't listen beyond the first 30 seconds of a song before she took a swig from her beer, shook her head, and skipped to the next track. Kate's uncle lined up a selection of shining blades beside the bowl of nachos. A strange excitement descended over all of us while we decided which body parts we wanted to remove. Kate, all smiles and wet eyes, suggested that I go first, to get it done before the nerves set in. Someone handed me a shot of something that smelt like lighter fluid. I drank it, then I felt myself nod. My legs moved manually as I approached Kate's uncle. His face was a hard outline while he sharpened and inspected his blades between each sip of beer. I noticed that his forearms were spotted with tiny flecks of red, and wondered how someone finds their calling in a slaughterhouse. There was rope and bandages strewn across the kitchen table. The crowd of people pressed in around me, watching and waiting. "Well, this'll be quick. Your fingers ain't too big," Kate's uncle said. "Oh, thanks." There was a metallic clatter as Kate's uncle scooped up his weapon of choice and held it aloft for the spectating crowd. He nodded, I nodded. Slowly, I placed my hand onto the table and spread my fingers out for all to see. There was a sharp jolt as the cleaver shunted into the kitchen table. There was a pinch, then, for a moment, nothing. At first, I wondered whether he had missed. Perhaps this was just a joke, a thing that everyone pretends to do, laughs about, and then carries on getting wasted. Kate's uncle dislodged the cleaver from the table. The wood cracked as he twisted it free. That's when I felt it. A wet weightlessness, stickiness under my palms, coldness pulsing over the back of my hand, and a burning, fizzing sensation up my arm. Then a queasiness coupled with a growing, breathless excitement. The first few fingers didn't hurt anywhere near as bad as I expected. I suppose that the vodka helped, as did the shared smiles from Kate and her friends. The drumming from the sound system was loud, making my whispered screams sound less pathetic, like I was screaming on purpose. Kate caught my fingertips before they rolled onto the floor and stuffed them into my jacket pocket. I felt a little guilty that some of my blood splattered onto her sleeve. It looked like an expensive sweater. But before I could apologize, she shook her head and offered me another drink. She's such a good friend. Most of the partygoers parted with a finger or two. In their own way, each did their best to act as though the hacking was nothing at all. It was just something we all did at parties, like taking a drag on a friend's cigarette. One of Kate's more drunken friends, Clara, decided to hack off her own leg, just above the knee. She had begged Kate's uncle for his cleaver for an hour until he finally gave in. Her cuts were sloppy, as expected. Some people watched, others didn't feel like giving Clara the attention. I felt like saying something to her, asking her to stop, but Kate placed a hand on my shoulder, shook her head, and told me, "Just leave her, she always pulls this shit." Clara seemed to regret the entire thing afterward and dragged herself off to the bathroom to clean up. Some of the others said she was in a rotten mood. She refused to leave the bathroom for the rest of the night. Thankfully, there was also an ensuite off of one of the bedrooms, so no one had to bother her, and we could continue with dancing and drinking. Good vibes all around. No one likes a party pooper. Kate's cousin, Annie, cozied up to me while I surveyed my finger nubs. We had cut up an old t-shirt and wrapped strips of fabric around the wounds to help them dry. Annie had curious eyes and waves of blue hair. She seemed interested in everything, yet shocked by nothing. She liked to stroke people when she spoke to them. I thought this was a bit odd, but whatever. Kate was busy, and I didn't have the nerve to approach anyone on my own. Annie's company would have to do. Annie showed me the stump where her left hand used to be. It had been hacked off some time ago and was healing nicely. It was a wrinkled ring of purpley flesh, like the opening of a drawstring bag. She seemed pleased with it, and I had said that it looked cool. As the night went on, Annie and I went to the porch to smoke. A cigarette perched in her good hand, Annie said, "We so totally should hang out more." She said I was funny and intense. I watched her words billow out in a gray puff. My cheeks burned red and my lips pulled back into an uncontrollable smile. I had never had anyone say such things to me before. It made me feel fuzzy in my stomach hearing these things from someone like Annie. Cool Annie with the waves of blue hair and her unwillingness to respect personal space. Then, she said I had pretty shoulders and needed to emphasize them. That was all it took to convince me to lose my arms. The cleaver bit into the table again. The pain was worse this time. A crunch of bone and an icy chill rippled under my skin. I think I vomited at some point. I can't remember, though I can remember the smiles. Everyone at the party was amazed at what a transformation I had gone through. They were all so nice. Kate even managed to find a cooler to keep my arms on ice. "Your shoulders look fantastic," Kate said. "See? I was right," Cool Annie said, smirking and playing with my hair. "You need to keep the wound clean," Kate's uncle said, throwing a washcloth at me. It was nice to feel noticed, to have people care about what I looked like. After I was all patched up and had a few more beers, I noticed it was late. I would have been more aware of the time earlier if my wristwatch and arms hadn't been packed away in a cooler and left by the front door. I was initially worried about how I would get home. I joked that without my arms, it'd be impossible to hail a cab. But Cool Annie reassured me. She said I could stay at her house for the night. Her father, Kate's uncle, was driving, and they had a sofa bed in their basement. So, Cool Annie picked up the cooler with my bits in it, and we went. Everyone said goodbye with a smile. Cool Annie blew kisses to everyone. I didn't, for obvious reasons. The journey to Cool Annie's house was long, and the car lurched with each bump in the road. The music on the radio crackled each time we drove under a tangle of tree branches. Kate's uncle tried to sing along to every song, but didn't know any of the words. Instead, he made vague noises to the tune. Cool Annie and I rattled on about people we might mutually know. I lied about knowing most of the names she threw my way. I gave her vague answers whenever she pressed me further about each person. As we spoke, Cool Annie giggled into my pretty shoulder. I tried my best to keep my balance, yet found my face pressed against the cold window each time the car made a turn. I tried to stop Cool Annie complaining to her dad about his driving, but she insisted. She told him to be careful. Lucy's still feeling unsettled from the hacking. He grunted an apology and continued singing. Then, after another 20 minutes or so, the car stopped. We were at Cool Annie's home. The house stood alone in a field at the end of a long driveway. In the moonlight, the wood-cladded sides to the house were striped with shadows. The windows were thick with the darkness. Cool Annie's dad was so helpful. He carried me out of the car and told me to watch my step as I walked in through the front door. I tripped in the darkness, perhaps on a rug, and knocked my shoulder on a nearby wall. I tried to hide my face while I winced and let Cool Annie support my weight. Cool Annie's dad left to fetch some spare bedding and a glass of water for each of us. As we waited, Cool Annie and I laughed about how Kate had botched one of the cuts to her fingers. It had looked wonky and knobbly, like a cast-off carrot. As the laughing died out, Cool Annie's face seemed to change. She looked tired and perhaps somewhat bored. "Sadly, it's only a matter of time," Cool Annie sighed. "Before what?" "Before hacking is no longer cool." "Yeah, I guess." I looked over at the cooler which Cool Annie had kindly brought in from the car. "Well, at least we can enjoy it for now, right?" "Yeah." Cool Annie's mind was elsewhere. She scratched at her stump. "I suppose." Then she smiled, and we started to talk about our favorite songs and movies. I was glad she changed the subject. I wanted to talk about something normal. Once Cool Annie's dad returned, they both showed me the basement. The light was yellow and weak, casting shadows down the wooden staircase. The air was warm and smelled damp. I didn't mind. Cool Annie and her father had been so accommodating. They didn't have to let me stay over, but they did, and I was grateful. Besides, I was so tired that I could have slept anywhere. The basement was small and cluttered. Motes of dust danced in the air as we disturbed them with our presence. There was a washing machine, stacks of old newspapers, and the sofa bed, which yawned and clicked as Cool Annie's dad pulled out its innards. "Why didn't your dad cut anything off tonight?" I whispered while Cool Annie twisted my hair into a loose plait. "Oh, he says he's too old for it," she said. "Besides, he prefers to be the one doing the hacking." Cool Annie flattened out the bed sheets and puffed my pillow. She smiled and stroked my face while I steadied myself onto the mattress. I smiled back. Friends. Then, Cool Annie and her dad ascended the staircase, leaving me below their house. "Night, Lucy," Cool Annie said from the top of the stairs. "Night, Lucy," Cool Annie's dad said. "Night." The light turned off, everything clicked out of view, the door locked. While I laid there in Cool Annie's dark basement, my shoulders pressed wet against the bedsheets. I smiled to myself and thought about how much fun I had had that night. I thought about how wonderful it was to be popular, to have friends, to be cool.